Welcome to the point of darkness.
Halloween in their small town always looked the same. Teenagers wore cheap masks. Adults decorated their houses with plastic pumpkins. And by evening the streets were full of laughter, music, and the smell of candy. But this year a group of 6 friends decided they wanted something more serious. Ordinary parties were boring. They wanted to feel real fear. The idea of going to the old cemetery came from Artem. He loved horror movies and always tried to prove he was afraid of nothing. At first the others laughed, but little by little the conversation became serious. By midnight they were already standing in front of the rusty cemetery gates with flashlights, hot coffee, and a portable speaker playing dark music. The group included Artem, Ilya, Kira, Nastya, Vlad, and Dennis. The cemetery stood near the forest outside town. Old graves were covered with grass, and some of the names on the stones had faded away long ago. Perfect atmosphere, Vlad said with a nervous smile. Just don't run away too early, Artem answered as he pushed the gate open. The metal screamed loudly in the silence. Inside, the air felt colder than outside. There was almost no wind, but the air was wet and heavy. Their flashlights moved across crooked crosses, cracked photos, and black trees. At first everything was fun. They recorded videos, joked around, and told scary stories. Nastya even suggested a challenge. Whoever stayed near the old crypt in the center of the cemetery, the longest would win. But the deeper they walked, the quieter they became. The music from the speaker suddenly began cutting out. Dennis hit the speaker with his hand. Battery dead. It was fully charged, Ilya replied. That was when they heard the sound. A slow scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across the ground. Everyone went silent. It's just the wind, Artem said quickly. But there was no wind. The scraping came again, closer this time. Kiro grabbed Nastya's arm. Maybe we should leave. Seriously, we just got here. They continued walking, though nobody was laughing anymore. The old crypt looked much larger than it did during the day. The tall stone structure seemed wrong among the graves. Above the entrance hung a cracked sign, but the letters were impossible to read. Artem pointed his flashlight at the black door. So, who goes first? Nobody answered. The silence felt unnatural now. Even the insects had stopped making noise. Ilya suddenly frowned. Do you smell that? A strange smell filled the air. Wet earth mixed with something sweet and rotten. Nastya covered her nose. That's disgusting. At that moment the speaker turned on by itself. There was no music, only static. Then a voice, very quiet. Leave. Dennis dropped the speaker. Did you hear that? Nobody answered because all of them had heard it. Artem tried to laugh, but the sound came out weak. Maybe it picked up some radio signal. Then the voice came again, louder. Leave. Artem's flashlight flickered and died. The others went dark one after another. The cemetery disappeared into total darkness. Nastya screamed. Someone took a slow step in the darkness. Then another. Heavy footsteps on wet ground. Who's there? Vlad shouted. No answer. Only footsteps. Then a pale white light appeared between the graves. At first they thought it was another flashlight, but the light floated too high above the ground, and it moved too smoothly, as if it were gliding. Kira started crying. I don't like this. Dennis finally turned on the flashlight on his phone. The beam shook in his hands. That was when they saw the figure. Tall, thin, standing motionless between the graves. Its face could not be seen. There was only a white blur where the head should have been. Nastya screamed again. The figure suddenly leaned forward. At the exact same moment every flashlight turned back on. But the figure was gone. We're leaving, right now, Ilya whispered. Nobody argued. They hurried back through the cemetery without looking around. The scraping noise came again behind them, this time much closer, like something enormous crawling after them. Vlad looked back first. Then froze. There's someone there. The others turned around. At the end of the path stood a tall shadow near the crypt. Then another shape appeared beside it. Then a third. None of them moved. They simply watched. Don't run, Artem said. But he was the first one to sprint. The others ran after him. Gravel cracked under their feet. Branches hit their faces. and their breathing became uneven. Behind them the footsteps seemed faster. When they finally reached the gate, Dennis stopped suddenly. "Where's Nastya?" Everyone turned around. She was gone. For a moment nobody could speak. Then her scream echoed from deep inside the cemetery, and suddenly stopped. Kira shouted that they had to go back for her, but Ilya grabbed her arm. "Are you insane?" Artem tried to decide what to do. Then the pale white light appeared again. This time much closer. It moved slowly between the trees, and the scraping sound came with it. Dennis whispered, "That thing isn't human." At that moment Nastya burst out of the darkness. Her face was pale and she could barely breathe. "Run!" They escaped through the gate and stopped only when they reached the road. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally Vlad asked, "What happened back there?" Nastya stayed silent for a long time. Then she answered quietly, "Someone near a grave was calling my name." Who? It sounded like my grandmother. Everyone looked at each other. Nastya's grandmother had died 3 years earlier. After that night nobody laughed anymore. They returned home quickly and promised never to come back. But the story did not end there. The next morning Artem noticed a strange mark on his arm. Dark like a bruise. He thought he had hurt himself while running. But the mark did not hurt, and it felt ice cold. A few days later the same marks appeared on the others. Everyone except Nastya. Doctors had no explanation. The marks never changed color and always felt cold. But the worst part came later. Every night one of them dreamed about the cemetery. Always the same dream. Fog. The crypt. And the tall faceless figure. It never came close. It simply stood far away. But every night it moved a little closer. A month later Dennis stopped answering messages. When the others visited his house he looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, and strange symbols covered the walls of his room. "It comes every night," he whispered. "Who?" "That figure." Dennis said he woke up every night at 3 in the morning, and saw the shadow outside his window. At first it stood near the road. Then near the yard. Then directly beneath the window. And the night before, he thought it had already entered the room. Ilya tried convincing him to see a doctor, but Dennis shook his head. "You don't understand. We brought something back with us." A week later Vlad admitted he had seen the figure too. Then Kira. Then Artem. None of them slept normally anymore. Every phone call at night made them jump. Sometimes they thought they heard someone slowly walking outside. One night Artem woke up because of a scraping sound, the same sound from the cemetery. He looked outside. Nobody was there, but a long mark stretched through the snow, as if something heavy had been dragged across the ground. The trail ended directly below his window. After that the friends met again. They decided to return to the cemetery during the day and find out what happened. But when they arrived, the crypt was gone. Only an empty field covered with weeds remained. The cemetery caretaker told them no crypt had ever existed there. That was when Artem felt true fear, because all of them remembered the black door. The cracked sign, the white light. Before leaving, Nastya noticed an old woman standing near the gate. The woman stared at them carefully. "You entered that place at night, didn't you?" she asked. Nobody answered. The old woman slowly nodded. "Some doors should never be opened." Then she walked away. They never saw her again. A year passed. The friends almost stopped talking about that night. But the marks remained on their skin. Sometimes darker, sometimes nearly invisible, but never completely gone. And the strangest thing happened on the next Halloween. At exactly 3 in the morning, every one of them received a message from an unknown number. It contained only one photograph, the old crypt. And the tall figure standing beside the door. Below the picture was a short message: "You are still here." None of them ever discovered who sent it, and from that day on, the friends never celebrated Halloween again.
Friends, thank you for watching to the end. If you don't mind, please support me with a like and a subscription. I'll see this and will make more and better videos. Thank you for your attention.